5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sync. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the TTV podcast. I'm Meso.
I'm Var.
I'm Eljay.
And I'm Jonathan.
It's TTV 255.
Dude, you usually say the number at the start before you do the name.
Yeah, I forgot.
You're all like
That's like Brickfeed,
dude,
man. That's
Sorry,
it's
dude.
crazy how changing the time of day we record this thing completely changes my mindset. Yeah. How I feel as a person and a human being.
right.
Everything's off. Everything's wrong. I don't feel right in my body.
I completely agree with you, dude.
It's wrong when it's
feels
right.
bizarre.
It's black when it's white. You're in, you're out.
What?
You're down.
Song. This is right.
Okay.
Full disclosure, just in case this podcast...
This is the new Mardi Gras, just random sounds.
just in
Just random
case...
grunts. Go
Just
for
in
it.
case this podcast has a different flavor than usual. Var, please. We're doing the podcast almost 11... We're doing about 11 hours later than we usually do on Wednesday, as opposed to Saturday, so it's a completely different time. It doesn't mean much to you watching, but it will to us recording, so keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
we're probably gonna be really tired sounding, which is gonna be unfortunate because like we all just got off of like 8-hour shifts at work.
Three
and
of
we're all
us
sitting
did.
here.
Yeah.
In the like, well, yeah, but that's like the majority of this podcast.
Yeah,
There's
I know.
4
And the
people
only
here.
the only reason that we're rescheduling
It's
is because
literally
of the one guy that didn't.
75% of this podcast is going to sound tired and not in their usual standard, and then the other 25% took a sleeping pill. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's true.
this podcast is going to be very different.
Yeah.
Why the
It's
heck
gonna be-
did you take a sleeping pill?
Because
Because I gotta be up for my plane.
Yeah, he's got
That's
to
why
why
we're
I
doing it
thought it was
tonight.
dumb too.
Why couldn't we have done it without you?
Because apparently they got ideas.
We have stuff to... Well, listen, I can't make a bot that just tells stupid jokes and it approximates what I normally do on this podcast.
You're right, because you're not funny, and
Are we
you're
ever-
cheap.
Are we ever going to address the fact that was an actual like soundbite? There were like people that were legitimately confused.
No,
Thought
see,
you were
the
there.
fact,
We never
I
addressed
love
it.
that. I love that because it means people literally couldn't tell the difference with Eljay just saying one phrase over and over again. They're like, I mean, it sounds like Eljay to me. You know, he's not...
Yeah, that sounds like what LJ would usually
Yeah,
do
it's
during an
like-
episode.
I feel very, very
Making
happy.
random dumb statements that don't actually
Only-
contribute to the podcast.
only
There
Okay,
you
listen
go.
here, pal.
Only hardcore fans would know of Eljay Bot. It was a joke from like our early days, I think like the first 50 episodes. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was a pre-recorded soundboard, basically.
I did not actually show up on that episode, but I am very happy that I was able to encapsulate my personality in those sound bites.
I'm happy to. It means you'll live on when we're all gone.
Random, stupid, and unhelpful.
Okay, you know, Var, I thought...
I'm just saying, the LJ bot didn't really do much to contribute to the actual discussion. So if you really want to identify with a bot, then go.
Yeah, you
that's
seem really
fine.
happy about like
I'm just-
everyone being
I'm proud.
confused because you didn't do anything in episode. You're like, I
Says
guess
you,
so.
Mr. Leg Debate. You want to talk about being useless? How's about every time you bring up, oh, I want him to be tall.
Please.
I mean,
like
you,
the-
That's
you can blame
that's a-
you can blame Kahi.
Yeah.
You can blame the leg debate on Kahi, but I will blame the mass debate on you.
Ooh, hey, the mask debate got
I
us to a
am.
good place.
I brought up the mask debate.
Not because of you.
Are you kidding me? I contributed. That was one of the times where I was actually helpful.
Technically, it was me and Scorpion Strike, but
Listen, yes, Scorpion Strike was the one that broke the ice. He found the treasure, but I helped.
okay, now
Occasionally.
Scorpion Strike broke the ice. I dove into the freezing water and got the treasure out of the pond. You fell in the lake and died.
Yeah.
That's what,
What the heck? What do you
You were
mean?
the intermediary.
So
I-
I was
they-
on the front line.
Meso was the only one that actually like
You were taking-
contributed to the point that gave us to a
Eldray,
a place where we could all.
You were
Yeah, we
sitting
could
there
all
ta-
coincide.
You were sitting there basically out on the front lines as cannon fodder while I like planned my strategy. And like,
Here's what you did. You reminded people of my idea. That's what you did.
What was your? Oh my gosh!
The Makuta,
Okay, so
like
for
talking
anyone,
to Makuta thing. The Makuta giving
For
a
anyone that
command.
doesn't
That was my
know-
idea.
Kahi has a complex of claiming things
Is it an
that
apartment
may
complex?
or may not have been his.
He does have
This
that
one, you
trait.
can listen.
You do okay. You do have that trait.
You can-
actually.
you can-
That is
you
something
can
that you
go
do
through-
a lot.
We did reach a compromise thanks to the efforts of all the people in here, plus our studio audience.
Thanks.
all
How
of
did
us
we,
together.
Appreciate it.
Yes,
I didn't
we
go
all
back and
played,
watch that podcast because obviously I was a part of it, so I didn't need to watch it. But I am curious, how did you end up editing that?
the laziest way imaginable.
He literally just tacked it
Literally,
on the
like
end.
I
You just
quite
did you give like an explanation or like
yes, okay, fair enough.
disclaimer?
The laziest way would have been no disclaimer. I did do a disclaimer. I did about a 1.5 minute long thing at the start explaining what happened and saying that I understand it was going to be too long, but if you wanted to check it out, timestamps are in the description if you don't feel like watching the whole thing. And
that was a very unique time, I think, with TTV, where it was very clear that the discussion should not have ended where we ended.
Right.
Yes.
Because like we'd stopped recording only to immediately get into the actual like meat and potatoes of the discussion
It was
out of recording.
we were getting into it, and then we had to cut it short because of the runtime. And it's one of
Craig,
those times where I feel
Craig.
like we should. Well, we normally do an after show. By the way, for people listening, we usually do some sort of thing. It's not as long usually. Sometimes,
No, we don't.
but we do for the
we do.
patrons and stuff.
We don't record it.
talk.
well,
yeah, we don't
We don't
record
record
it.
it.
That's not
That's
what
what I'm saying is that like if
we sit around in the sponsor chat and we talk.
if
Yeah.
you donate to our Patreon, you can hear all the stuff you miss out on.
Exactly. So what happened
This was the one time where our after show actually was released.
The
into a public
secret
format.
unsung hero of TTV is one of our members named Craig. He's always in the background helping us back up record our podcast. And what happened with Craig last week was he actually dropped the ball and he didn't record the actual podcast. But it just didn't work, it glitched, but for some reason he was able to back up record our post-show discussion miraculously.
It's
So we were
always
able to
when
release it.
someone leaves, Craig kind of messes up a little bit.
Yes, that's true.
He's not sure what to do with that. So
I don't know how it happened, but we were able to cut it all together. And to answer your first question, I literally just took the podcast, kept the outro and everything, put in like a beep, and then it transitioned into the after show.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Well, Meso, I did not envy you for having to edit that, so good job.
It was not pleasant. It was
I'd hope you didn't envy him, but did you
Main-
purple him?
Really? You even pronounced it properly. Envy.
Yeah. What happened was like
I mean, you don't pronounce it envy, do you?
I invite you to continue with this discussion.
and
What?
the 3-hour-long podcast basically took as long to render
I don't know
as
either.
1-hour-long podcasts on my old laptop. Was basically the link. It was not fun to edit, but it got out. People seemed to like it, so all's well that ends well. What say you guys? You want to just jump right in?
No, I want to slide in.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Are you LJ
I mean,
bot right now?
I know, right? It's like can't tell the
I
difference.
like it.
am I talking to an AI? All right.
Maybe we just fragmented the AI fragment that has the
You
humans
tell him,
just put in
Var.
there.
So last week.
Okay.
A quick
Telling him. What am I telling you?
Quick summary of
Oh,
our
Ven, you need to calm down.
Shut up.
Shut
Summary of our
up.
podcast from last
See,
week.
this is what we mean.
We had
Oh,
some
now you
discussions
did it.
about rock sheep hours.
I'm sorry, Ness, I
namely
didn't mean to interrupt you.
mirages and also erosion.
I didn't. I just hope. I hope you don't realize that. Or I hope you're not mad at me. Don't hold it against me. I didn't mean. Okay. Didn't mean.
You done?
Hey, Meso, are you gonna actually start the podcast or what, man? We're waiting.
Last week, we conceptualized 2 of their rock sheep powers thanks to the efforts of several community members, namely Ultimate Mustache X. As a baseline, the 2 rock sheep powers
you're a
that were in
community member, I hate
question
you.
were Anrak and Gurak, who, if everything goes according to plans, will be mirages and erosion, respectively. Slight tweaks on the pre-existing ideas. Now, Ultimate Mustache X did post a comment I would like to address before I give the usual disclaimer and we jump on board, that being that he didn't want us to discount gravity immediately because his initial idea was to have the rock sheep go up against a different character first. So like I mentioned how it would make sense if Gurak fought against Liwa, but not if Gurak fought against Gali, because gravity versus wind. And he wanted to make that known it was going to be a different character, and then they were going to switch to their respective elemental-based characters later on. To which I say, I acknowledge that that was your intention. I just wanted to bring that up so people don't get the wrong idea. That being said, that doesn't really work for our pitch, because we have this backstory where Liwa Vizuna and Irune Lirak have this personal relationship with one another, and they're like going at each other. So we could have another Rakshi be like Liwa's main combatant simply for the sake of combat, but that would not be nearly as interesting as the character drama.
I mean, I wouldn't say that we wouldn't have different Rakshi fight against different Toa as far as like the different elemental things. Like I can totally see them introducing their presence to the Toa by fighting
A different
elements.
Right, that makes sense.
And then the actual arc begins after that. That's fine. You can still do both.
But for those two characters, it doesn't make sense for like was it Lirak?
Yeah.
To be designed to go up against Gali. That shouldn't be like the design of
that
the
shouldn't
character.
be the thing.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's like I think that's the design philosophy isn't quite what we're going for. We want the Rakshi to balance against the Toa that they're respective Toa they're partnered up against.
Quite right.
They can, of course, we can take those once those are developed. We can then make them fight other ones that they might be more of a challenge to, but shouldn't be part of the actual.
Exactly. I just wanted to bring that up mainly because I want people to think like, oh, why would he do gravity? That doesn't make any sense. He did have logic. It just doesn't necessarily work with what we're doing. And now, the actual stuff from last week as part of our Brickonicle Project, which is a fan-made reimagining of the BIONICLE franchise.
Official.
Despite Var's jokes, it is definitely not
It is completely
official.
not a joke, and is definitely real and actually happening. And if you want to go to the comment section, you'll see all the people saying that asking if it's happening. I want you to make sure you reply to those people and say yes, it is 100% happening.
It is not real. It's a fan project.
And you call me
That's
unproductive.
just what it is. So,
I mean, you can both be unproductive. To be fair, one does not negate the other.
That's true.
last week,
Hey Meso, can you wake up and be a bit more peppy and happy with your podcast hosting?
can you maybe not be as peppy? Can you maybe dial it back a little bit? I thought you were supposed to be dead to the world. But now you're
I'm the
You're
life
supposed to
of
be
the party
Falco.
here.
So last week the main thing was the mask debate. It came out of nowhere. It lasted for like 2 hours, and we ended up reaching a resolution. Quick summary: masks were taken away by the Toa way back when because their power was too much for the islanders to bear. They locked them away in vaults underground and left the keys to unlock said vaults to the next generation of Toa and the canisters, just in case there would ever come a time where they needed the power of the masks to turn the tide against evil. So years later, because of
That's a good summary.
some trickery with Makuta, the masks is going to get reintroduced into the climate of Artaka. That's basically what we decided. This week, we might mention masks, we might not. We basically, the current gist with Brickonicle is we're addressing some community feedback and some feedback from some people in our own company. We're making a story Bible. That's basically what we're doing. It's not ready yet, but eventually we will be releasing it once it is ready.
Yeah.
It is very close to be. I mean, like, well, very close in like air quotes. But it's
Pretty
we do
close.
have
Maybe
a
like
lot
halfway
of
done.
we do have a lot of content on it. The main thing that we want to talk about today is stuff that we have,
We have
in
some
mind.
pitches for
Right.
it, and we want to clear that in a podcast atmosphere so we can move forward developing the story Bible. Because really, I see a lot of people, some of the fans find it hard to keep up with it because they come up with our project because they don't know everything. Some of our cast members find it difficult to keep up because they're lost. So yes, this story Bible will be replacing the outdated everything canon and G3 topic on the boards, and you'll be able to just go to the story Bible, read it if you can handle reading all the pages, and then you'll be up to date with our Brickonicle project once that comes out. So this week, just to check expectations, primary point of conversation will be some pitches by John and Var. And Eljay and I will be the peanut gallery, roasting and or providing critique towards them.
Not sure if it's going to take up the primary conversation of the entire podcast.
Yeah, I feel like
Depends on the pitches. I don't know what your pitches
I
are.
think that takes primary conversation stuff we
Oversold
disagree
it.
about, and I don't think anyone's
fair.
really going to disagree about this. It's just kind of like
I've deliberately kept myself away from the story Bible, so
See-
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Did you just preface this with, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with this?
Yes.
I mean, I don't
don't think
necessarily
so.
disagree with that statement
right.
either.
yeah, like it's just
I'm
stuff
interested.
for the villagers.
I haven't heard any
so.
of this, so I really want to
Oh,
know.
well, I think maybe that is some wishful thinking, guy. LJ does have a habit of disagreeing with things.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
just
Hey,
to
listen,
disagree.
You have flip-flopped almost more than Meso did when we were finalizing our entries for the Brickonicle contest.
Oh, come on.
I like short legs. I don't like short legs. I like short legs. I don't
I know,
want masks. I want masks.
It's almost like we had an ever evolving and changing conversation about actual problems and actual arguments that are being presented that were really good and actually convincing. It's amazing how you can actually switch some of the things that you believe.
As though the preface.
It's almost like being a brick wall isn't actually a positive thing, or helpful, or benefits towards any evolution of our product at all.
It's almost like Var gets what we're trying to do and is keeping an open mind and trying to figure out which is the best course to go.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, right?
I'm just saying, listen, the preface, I don't think anyone was going to disagree with this, has been proven wrong. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
We couldn't even disagree. We couldn't even agree on not disagreeing. Okay, sure. Let's jump right in.
See what I mean?
I doubt that any of their pitches
This is you, Eljay. This is you disagreeing about something.
I doubt that any of their pitches are wildly controversial.
So can you stop talking over us? It's really getting annoying.
Oh my gosh. Oh boy. I'm sorry, Meso. I host my own podcast too. These.
Yes, poorly.
Mark gets into it news.
Everybody here does except for Var, so he's commandeering mine.
Exactly.
I mean, Var used to host this podcast, so.
I did my my years of hosting. I put in my years. Now I'm retired. I'm old,
did
I'm
my
senile,
time.
I'm angry at the world.
I guess you're the peanut galley. Alright.
I don't even like peanuts.
Let's just have him
Or do I,
start.
dude?
Can we just have him start?
Yeah, fine. Go ahead
Nope,
and
we can't.
I'm not the one starting. I'm gonna hand the floor over, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Are you the one ending?
Have our start the
Pitch.
pitch.
Pitch me stuff, dude. Pitch it.
Okay. So let's see. What am I going to pitch to you? Well,
I disagree.
obviously, while writing the story Bible, some of the things that we had discussed in our podcast were touched upon but not really fleshed out a lot, especially when it came to like writing the regions of the world and everything. I think Mungai at the time was our most developed of the regions, with Ihu coming in second. But none of the other six were really, or the other, I don't know how to count, four.
Appropriate to G2 Bionicle. Tahu's the most important, everybody else not so much.
Yeah, well, Tahu was always a good starting point. He was even like that with the actual designs of the characters. I always started with Tahu, and then you kind of branch out from others. So, anyway, one of the pitches involves Kanae, the region of wind, and it was sort of trying to make sense of the culture and develop that further, because obviously we all kind of have ideas as to what Kanae is and what it represents in terms of like how the characters act, behave. I think we all can agree that the characters are meant to be lighthearted and kind of fast talkers and like happy-go-lucky people and everything. So that's been like a staple of Bionicle, pretty easy to do there. But trying to get those personalities and relate that to how the culture works in that region was sort of what I was going for with writing out the pages for the Kanae section. And most of that involves sort of how the society works, from the government to how the Matoran interact. So the one thing that we touched upon in the podcast was that they are essentially our exporting region, right? They handle all the exports across the island, and they use gecko birds and other rahi to travel from region to region and deliver packages and things and exports, that kind of stuff. So to tie that back to the region itself, I wrote that the people of Kanae are really like fast-paced, really high-living. I took inspiration from like New Yorkers almost, how you're constantly moving to a destination, you're always trying to find something to do, or you have somewhere to be, some kind of work that you need to get done. Sort of how I imagine the people of Kanae. They're not really ever in one place at a very long amount of time. And I also put in the little detail that a lot of them don't spend time in their own region either. Most of them are traveling the world, sightseeing, visiting other regions, meeting new people, interacting with other societies a lot of the time. That's sort of how a natural progression of them becoming the export region sort of happened, because, you know, they're all over the place already, and they're always moving. So it's a pretty easy way to explain that sort of facet of their personalities. Sort of furthering onto that, I also pointed out the government of Kanae isn't really like amazing or great. It doesn't really do anything for the region. It's kind of just a government in name only. I described it as a republic in the story Bible, in the sense that the Kanae Matoran elect a president to run their region, but it's sort of like one of those. It's not really a true republic. It's got like a high a split civilization where the majority of the Kanae Matoran are going to be like your 90%. They're going to be like living in poverty for most of the region, and then like that last 10%, the elite class lives in the like one social area, and there's like a social circle, and they kind of vote on themselves to be in power and in the high political status. So they kind of use their resources to help them succeed throughout life, but not really. It kind of ignore the rest of the region. But keep in mind that's only like a small 10%. Pretty much everybody in the region isn't really well off. They all kind of live in very small shacks, very small huts, which is, I think, part of the reason why they would leave the region and go to other places, because their home life isn't like fantastic. It's not like amazing. I wouldn't say it's terrible per se, but it's not really something worth spending a lot of time in. Also, one of the things that I added was that the people are really hyperactive in nature, really talkative, really happy all the time, and to the point where it can annoy most of the other regions. And part of that hyperactivity is because they're always so busy, they're always doing something. There's a lot of work, psychology in the region. But part of that is also tying into the life expectancy of the region.
Oh no!
It's pretty low, understandably, because of the impoverished sort of state it's in. The Matoran typically don't live very long lives compared to the other regions, and it's part of because there's a lot of poverty in the area, and also because of their hyperactive nature. They're constantly exploring dangerous places or doing dangerous things or thrill seeking. And that brings down the life expectancy quite a bit.
So they're like, they're the kind of like if there were cell phones, they would be like hanging off buildings and like they're like Russian teenagers,
pretty much.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
They're always seeking something to keep their attention, essentially.
Makes
Like
sense.
they don't
Thrill
like
seekers,
to
adrenaline
sit
junkies.
around.
Yeah.
They don't like to sit around in one place and just like play with their thumbs. They want to do something. So. To kind of counteract that, I had a lot of fun writing this section. To counteract the high life expectancy, there's also a very high reproductive
Birth rate
part of the of the region, where families in Kanae typically they kind of produce more Matoran at a rapid rate compared to other regions, and obviously. Since the region isn't really a place that a lot of people spend a lot of time in, same can be said for the families as well. Most of the families don't really stay together. They always kind of split off, do their own thing. Most Kanae Matoran are considered adults well before they've reached maturity, at least maturity in other regions. So family life isn't really a big part of Kanae, but it is a big part of spreading Kanae Matoran and producing more of them. And that's kind of, I think that kind of ties into Vizuna's story a little bit too, because she's an orphan in our story. And I think it makes a lot of sense for her to be an orphan, considering the way the society works. Families aren't really that important. The family structure's not that important. The whole idea is to make kids. Those kids go out and do tasks and duties, and everybody's constantly doing something. So it's really easy to get left behind, or forgotten, or you like lose your way as far as like mentorship and family and that kind of thing.
Very interesting.
So I think that ties in a lot. And I think a lot of the negative parts also tie in a lot to Aruni and how he feels about the society as well, because he's not really happy with it. He hates the government. He hates everybody else. He's got a lot of vile thoughts that have been kind of produced because of his state of unhappiness.
The anger, the rage, etc., etc. Well, all right then. That sounds very interesting.
All that kind of fits in.
I don't really...
Yeah, I think the travel concept's good. I think the little mortality
Basically
way.
matches up with how I'd expect.
I was thinking of like when you mentioned that, I was thinking of like kids doing like insane Gecko, like Gecko tricks and everything, and they're swooping in, they're doing all this crazy stuff, and then they die.
Kind of, yeah. Like I think death isn't really a big thing for Kanae Matoran. They don't really care about it too much, which is kind of, it's both a problem but also a good thing too, I guess, for like for them, it's not something to dwell upon.
Right.
So it's sort of like life goes on, life moves on. You keep doing what you're doing.
So you would say like
have fun with your life.
Funerals aren't really a thing, right? They wouldn't have funerals in our culture. That's like giving too much attention to death. It's just a thing where like
exactly.
Huh. I like that. That's a completely different take on it, but I feel like it really works well with the characters. Gives that culture a little bit more flair to it, I guess. And it's also like
I feel like it's very different from the other ones.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Do you disagree on any of that?
I mean, for the sake of this alleged fudge, I lost the word. Non-assistance or whatever. No, that sounds fine. It's very non-Lego line-ish, but I mean, it's a good story.
Yeah, I mean, like, we probably won't show any kid Matoran dying on the show or anything.
Yeah, I actually I responded to a person on the board.
I was just
going
to
mention how we put a lot of time and like work into some of like these societies and the big political structure, and how it's too much for like a Lego toy line. I think it's really important to remember that these, like, all these details that we're putting into this is really strictly for us as writers, and obviously for everybody listening to this podcast, because technically you were part of the writing team as well in this hypothetical here.
Maybe like the guy who gets coffee for the writing team and just listens in.
Well, it
says one or two clever things, yeah.
In the actual plot, the story for Brickonicle, 90% of this stuff may not.
It won't be addressed.
It won't be addressed, but
or if it does, it will be in supplemental material.
It will help us kind of write the characters consistently. Like, we can be like, these characters want to do this because in the story Bible, this happened. It's part of their culture, or it's part of this, and that's why they don't do it. And if you have everything consistent, it resembles that. People can get that when they're experiencing your stuff. The world building helps your world feel more realistic because there's so many rules that are implied in it.
Like, I don't want to say things are going to be dumbed down for the story, but they will be they'll be streamlined. They'll be presented in the narrative in a way that some of this stuff. I put it in my post in like this way is like if we're going to be following the narrative through the eyes of the Toa anyway, so if the Toa aren't there physically to witness something happen, then the story won't witness it either. The narrative won't witness it either, and the audience listening to the story is not going to witness it either.
But
this does give avenue for like serials or everything to be written about it, you know.
Right.
But
what else?
What about all of our main side characters? Like, you know, aren't we gonna have Matoran characters like what's it, Kongu and Chronicles?
Well, we haven't really discussed.
Maybe will.
We haven't really discussed this yet. It's something I've been wanting to get to eventually.
That
probably when we're done. But
yeah, see the problem with that is that won't be able to be determined until the story Bible's done and we're actually ready to write the narrative part.
Right.
What I was getting to was I feel like there will come a time where we're gonna say like, all right, this is a Big Bang theme in our hypothetical. So how many storytelling methods are we going to have realistically in our fictional budget, and what story will be told through those? We already said we want to have a show. I presume that will chronicle the main story.
Yes.
Do we want to have books? Do we want to have comics? Do we want to have story serials? Do we want to have an online game a la Menog? Any one of those four things could follow other
That's why
characters.
we're fleshing everything out.
See, yeah, that's why I think like a lot of those questions will be addressed when we actually sit down to write the narrative, because it'll all depend on how much we can fit into a TV show, right?
Exactly.
We might get like 4 episodes in, and then we'll realize, you know what, we still need content to fill out like the next 3 or something. We could have done a Matoran side story or something and fit that in there.
Right.
We won't really know until we actually sit down to write that part.
Think about like
we do have options and avenues.
Think about how like Avatar, right, is a story of like these 4 or 5 main characters, and then you additionally have, you know, like you have a episode dedicated to Uncle, you know, Iro and Iroh, and you have like all this other stuff that happens. So we could maybe devote an episode, but like we do have 6 main characters. We do need to focus on them for the majority of the thing. There will definitely be side characters, but the idea of we didn't want to split up the story between the Toa and the Matoran, and they have the Matoran story and the Toa story concurrently going in different things, and then, you know, because that's how it was in Menog, and we didn't get the Toa story until later on. So
most definitely.
A little misleading and inaccurate, but
also I don't know when the idea that like being like Avatar suddenly became a bad thing? Because I'm pretty sure that was like one of the things we were talking about when we were talking about Bionicle and how good it could be. It'd
Well,
be like,
no, it's
wouldn't it be
kind of
cool?
just it's like a pseudo drinking game. It's like, well, he's referred to Avatar again. Orange juice down the hatch.
Was
I
that
feel
on the
it's
bingo card? I think it was on the
I
bingo
mean, it's
I
Game
don't
of
know.
Thrones. On the bingo card, it's Game of Thrones.
It was Game of Thrones.
How is
Which,
it?
ironically, I don't think we've actually referred to very much.
Yeah,
What was
that actually
misleading about
perplexes me.
I was on to follow up on that logic train. What was misleading about saying the Toa story didn't come till later? In Manog.
In Manog, sure, but there were still comics.
True. That's true.
No, sure.
The comics
did start with
preceded. The comics were concurrent with Manog.
Very true, very true. And that's the kind of stuff like in the perfect world. That's what I wish had happened in G2, and that's what I hope for later on in G3, telling multiple sides of the same story through different mediums that are appropriate.
We just have to make sure that we're focusing on the main narrative and that the supplemental stuff is supplemental.
Is supplemental,
This is
right?
true.
And the main narrative is told through the TV show.
Exactly, the
'Cause-
TV
You mean
show must
books.
be the core.
Nah.
Prentice calling me out for not including an image in the episode. Sorry, dude.
Big surprise.
Make that a
that
bingo
should be added to the
option.
bingo. Yeah.
So forgets to include an image. I think it,
One other thing that I did add to Kanae was like the final thing is that of all 6 regions, the Kanae region is the only one that still believes in the legend of the Toa, and it is active in the sense that they still believe that there is a Liwa, and they even have a temple dedicated to Liwa in the region.
Sweet, I get a temple.
you do.
Yeah. So it can. I think in the Bible, I described it as region's one of the few that still worships the legend of Liwa, the courageous Toe of Wind, and it's told to most citizens as children. Statue of Liwa rests in the Temple of Faith, which can be found in the Kuma Islets in the southernmost section of the region, and the Temple of Uxar can also be found there. And many Matoran go there to offer blessings.
Well, all right then.
It's one of the regions that is still fairly religious.
Right. But
Naho obviously being the most religious of the regions.
Right.
Well, part of me that's.
is it Naho or
cool.
Naho?
It's
Whichever.
both. It doesn't really matter.
I have
it's like Liwa or Lua.
no opposition to Kanae being like that. I'm just like thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if that was Tiro instead?
Stop disagreeing, Meso. It's against the law.
I mean I don't necessarily think it can't be Tiro either. Like you can do both.
Because I'm just thinking, like, I know we've offhandedly mentioned like Tiro is still like in development, and there's like. I know that you guys have some stuff for Tiro, but like in the past couple podcasts, you're like Joe and Kanae were the ones we didn't have, and you just presented a very like interesting view of Kanae. But the impression I got was like kind of nihilistic. In a
Yeah,
sense,
no, I
without
get
being
that. I get
overly
that.
like that.
Right.
Kind of like Devil May Care. I wouldn't peg them to be the heavy religious people, but I would say Tiro perhaps if it's all about like scholarly stuff and like.
Well, I mean, I kind of imagined they would take a lot of put a lot of faith in religion because they don't care about death.
Religion's
That
a lot
is an
about an
alternative
afterlife.
way
And
to
to be
look
fair,
at
we
it.
don't have a thing for the afterlife. We could make like
We don't really yet. But
we can make that a red. Yeah,
that
like,
was kind of my thought process.
Okay.
Is that like they believe in like an afterlife and whatnot.
That makes sense. Let's have the red
but,
star be the afterlife.
As far as nihilism, that was Ihu.
Oh yeah, I got it.
That we added some of the things. I think with Ihu, I added in the story Bible that they are the least in tune with their elemental lord, and they're pretty nihilistic in general. I think most of the Ihu like details are pretty much. Other than that, I think are pretty much things we've already discussed. Though there's not really too much new there.
Right.
Gotcha.
I read through that. It's about the same thing.
Funny comment from Willis is like for the G3 afterlife. If you were good, you go to G1. If you were bad, you go to G2. You're like reincarnated as like a Motara village.
So one thing I was actually thinking about with Ihu though is what is its main exports? Like what does Ihu produce in terms of
Snow
relation to the
cones.
island?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not really sure what Ihu would be able to produce. Like maybe technology, but.
Well, I
Then
always
I
thought
don't know what we would-
manga. Always kind of had that opinion was like the technology and kind of like weapon and forging and all that stuff. That was its center.
I'd never thought of Mungai as being very technologically advanced. To me, that seems a little out of character for them, because I feel like they were always the kind of the I don't want to say barbarians, but they were the I would say least.
I thought of them as like a military society, and military drives most of our technology today. The internet is created because of like DARPANet and everything. The internet wasn't really created as a a military construct. A lot of the stuff that we have today is because of military uses. So that's just when I think of the military. I think of
military society, I never thought of like a modern military. It was always sort of like Spartans. That's kind of why it's broken down in the city-states. So,
I mean, sure.
I mean, like I get what you're saying, but I don't know. I never really imagined them as technologically advanced. It seems kind of out of character for how we presented them.
Ihu doesn't have anything right now, so we can take that away from Mungai and give it to Ihu. That will make sense enough because they are no longer. They had like the knowledge crystals and all that stuff, and like Kometru and all that stuff.
They developed the Ihunet.
Yeah, so sure.
Yeah, I think that fits with them.
Okay, all right. No, that makes sense. Forward thinking, and that's why they would be the first to adopt the masks.
Yep.
Ties on.
And they also, I think it might also make sense because they sort of reject the more mystical elements of the lore as well.
Right.
So they're probably like doubling down on technology versus magic.
Okay. All right.
Compared to the other ones.
Okay. What's next? What do you got?
Okay, so I have stuff I wrote up from Motara.
Bring it.
All right, so let me see. Where do I start? Essentially, the landscape of Motara.
At the beginning.
Thank you, Meso. The landscape of Motara. It's like it's obviously it's a giant desert, but it's also essentially this giant canyon, right? And there's this natural cliffside that's very very sharp, very hard to scale, and there's natural like valleys that lead into like from the the mountainside and everything that lead into Motara. But they're guarded by these gates. There are 3 entrances to 3 of the Koros. There's the Forest Gate, there's the Ice Gate, or the Tundra Gate, and then there's the Volcanic Gate. And all these gates...
Obviously facing whichever regions
right.
are on the other side of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all these gates, 3 gates are ruled by the 3 Merchant Kings. So the term Merchant King is a little misleading because they are technically referred to as the kings, but they're more like maybe like crime bosses or like mob bosses in that sense, or CEOs of their own company.
Mafia. I'm very attached to this idea.
So essentially what they have is that because they control everyone who comes in and out of Motara, they control immigration, they control import, exports, and taxes. And so if you
They're kings in the same sense that the kingpin is a king.
Exactly, right. So the idea, Motara is a very lawless land. Everything goes. There is no police force. There is no like anything because the sandstorms are constantly coming up and all around the desert. It makes it hard for anyone to police any of these areas. So essentially, they have anything goes. Really, if you can steal it, it's yours. If you can, as long as you don't steal from someone who's bigger than you, who has people they can send after you or whatever. That's the only retaliation they have. There's only one exception to this, and that is the actual capital. City of Motara, because they're like city-states. The capital city of Motara is located in the eye of the sandstorm. So it is permanently clear. And what happens is the 3 Merchant Kings said, we need to come together. We need to create this compromise for the greatest thing we have of value. And they built a bank, essentially, this giant bank in the middle of this storm. And they all like kind of volunteer people from their personal armies and people from their mercenary armies. They all guard this bank essentially to make sure that the riches all stay in, for all 3 Merchant Kings. And then over time, what happened is that the people that worked in the mines and the mercenaries and the traders and the merchants and all of those guys, they put their families there because it was the one place that was permanently guarded and also the one place that wasn't ravaged by sandstorms all the time. And so there's an exchange of
you can kind of already see how the civilizations form around that.
Exactly. It forms around that. And so now you have this. It's the only place too that has a skyport for the Gakko from Kanae. Because the Gakko aren't used for trading or traveling or like shipping anything here because the sandstorms make it so hard for Gakko to get through. The only place they do come through is on this capital city, and they do this to both provide people access to the bank and also to give them access to the Koli field The Koli Field is the biggest
Hey.
one in the entire islands, where like essentially the World Cup is always held. It's kind of Koli is a newer thing relative to the Motara's existence. So it's, but like it's become one of the biggest things outside of also taxing and all this other stuff. Right.
Koli probably wasn't around in the last Toa.
It was not. Yeah. It's a newer sport, but it's been around for a while, obviously. It's just not like last 100 years or so. So the three merchant kings as of right now. The first one is that I had pitched around was Hafu. And Hafu, of course, kind of like taking from his character back in G1. He inherited the gate. So the gates can be passed from family to family, or they can be taken over. They can be bought over, or they can be like taken in a coup for different families moving around and that kind of thing. And so he inherited the gate. He's more of a craftsman, but he's still kind of he sells like delicate goods. He sells like like stuff for richer people to buy. So people in Kanae would buy his sculptures. People are like kind of a designer guy.
Yeah.
But he still controls the taxes. He's very lax immigration. The second is Velika. Velika is kind of like,
Oh, boy.
you remember the collector from Guardians of the Galaxy? That kind of like eccentric, like that guy, but speaking in riddles for a good bit of time. That's his kind of personality. He's a bit more. He is kind of a mentor, but he's more like kind of like a hoarder. He knows he's the oldest guy. He's been running the gate for a long while. He's the oldest merchant king right now, and he has this idea of how everything's supposed. He's kind of like the old guard. And the third one, and this is really is only going to be in year 2, because the third merchant king is Akmu, and Akmu is he only recently takes over the gate, because the last person who owned the gate had a lot of debts and a lot of things, and essentially Akmu bought him out by focusing on sports, and he capitalized on sports and everything. That was his industry that he kind of took over. And part of the coup that he does in order to get this money involves Pohatu throwing a match or doing something criminal or everything. And when Pohatu refuses, that's why it's such a big deal and everything. And like, so that ties into that backstory that's going on. So those are the three kings. Right now, there's a couple more things just about the added life. Mining is a big deal. People, that's basically, if you are not a merchant, you are a miner. The merchants take the stuff that the miners do. They have like Kikilano, they have like, Mahi and everything. They ferry them across because you can't carry them by Gakko. The Gakko can't get into Motara in the first place, and they're too heavy. So the merchants will take these goods and they'll travel all around. They'll do all that stuff. Mining.
Why is everything so heavy?
Mining is rough. Wow. Mining is really, really terrible and in the worst conditions. And again, it's a lawless land. So Motara doesn't have a concept of a jail. What they do have is being sentenced to work in the mines. So you will work in the mines as a slave, essentially, to pay off your life debt. Your family will live in the capital city, but you will essentially work about 8 months out of the year, essentially to pull that off. And it's horrible conditions. A lot of people die there, but that's kind of the life that there is. So the last thing that is kind of a big deal is the actual bank. The bank works by reinvesting. So if you have a business idea, if you want to bet, if you want to do anything, you go to the bank and you can apply for loans, just like, banks work in our culture right now. You can apply for loans in order to start your own thing. A lot of people go to start their own, merchant trade, or to start their own mercenary gang, that kind of thing. And then they get hired by the bigger guys, sometimes even the merchant kings. But there's other like factions and things inside that Motara that keep going. Now, if you like borrow a bunch of money from the bank and you don't pay it back, you are sentenced to work in the mines. A lot of people, when they don't actually pay back their debt, they will just run and go into hiding. So there's special mercenaries known as hunters, and they go and they essentially go and they find these Matoran to pay. They take them to the jail and they put them inside. And of course, the biggest organization of them all, the most renowned, is the Dark Hunters. Now, the Dark Hunters are all the reason why they're so big and so prevalent is because they take very good care of their mercenaries. They give them all code names. All these code names are prefaced by the title "the." So if you are, for instance, the Mimic, the Ancient, the Primal, or the Bully, the Beast, the Trigger, and of course, the Shadowed One.
Oh boy.
And that's essentially it. Oh, there is one more thing. There are giant light stones
that are embedded in sand, and there's like different clusters of them around the Motara Desert. And these are outposts. You know, the mining appears around them to mine lightstones, but there's also little outposts because you can see them through a sandstorm. So if you are a merchant and you have a Kikalano train and everything you're going through, you can find it to take refuge in, to do that kind of thing. Everywhere else, there's several towns that pop up, but they usually get ravished by sandstorms or mercenaries or something. So they're really the only true city there is the capital city of Motara. And there you go.
That
Because
picture's
first
awesome.
of all,
Go on.
it's Kikanalo, not Kikalano. And second of all,
Phenomenal.
wow, that was boring. But basically,
Oh,
it's
I'm
just
glad
a
you can
bunch of
contribute.
banks. Banks own Pokoro. Is that the gist of it?
Not really. No. I mean, like...
It's more of like a lawless land. It's kind of like Mad Max sort of.
Right.
So, while like I wouldn't say the banks own the region, but I would say like the commerce owns the region for sure. I kind of imagine it sort of looking like kind of Mad Maxy.
Right.
A lot of like nomadic people kind of moving around, like grabbing things, but they all sort of like have the fallback of the big city in the center with the banks. That's sort of like the central location of the region.
Right.
But the rest of the region is sort of like you just go out and you do whatever, then it all kind of comes back to the center.
How are people happy in this city?
How are you...
Well, to be happy in the city, you have like, I imagine it's sort of a very you kind of make your own wealth in this city. So I can imagine it being a fairly easy one to be happy in, because there's not really anything keeping you from being,
It's almost like
well off.
obviously
If you're a
this place
thief,
is
you
more
can be a thief.
structured. It's a combo
yeah,
of
it's one of if you play your cards right and smart, then you can make it big in this region.
It's more civilized, so it's not really like a direct interpretation of this. It's kind of like the Wild West or whatever. Like when people moved out west way back when, you go there to make your own
almost
way
like-
in life. But this place, there's like it's like a combo of like the Wild West, but also like the mob organization. So like
It's like the Nevada of Brickonicle.
in a sense, yes. I'm a sucker for all that, dude. Like that. That's prime storytelling. All that stuff. I can sink my teeth into like so much Motara stuff because I like Desert Raiders and stuff, but I also like mafia stories and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So to roll those up together with some sprinklings of G1 in the mix to the Dark Hunter organization, nice touch. The only thing I don't like is I wanted Umarak to be a Dark Hunter. Because
what
everybody
do you think
the-
is the Shadow One's
like,
real name?
The Shadow One's name is Umarak. That's awesome.
I was actually thinking about that. I was like, yeah, Umarak could totally be the Shadow One's name, because we never actually got it. And I mean, sure, why
That's
not?
killer.
I like it.
Thumbs
right.
up on my end.
Right. Var, any comments?
I think, for the most part, I think that was a pretty, maybe a bit wordy in some of the explanations in that section, simply because it's I think it's 3 pages compared to like the 2 that most of the other regions have.
Yeah.
But I think, I like the gist of pretty much everything, and the details are all pretty good. I think that the only thing I don't really feel per se is the Dark Hunters part, but like it works, so I don't mind. I can't imagine where else I would put them, so
Yeah.
whatever.
That's what I was thinking too. I was like, we might not have them at all, but if we did have to put them somewhere, this seems like a decent place as
It's like
any.
an evolution of the aforementioned like raiders groups that have been mentioned like on and off.
Yeah.
All right,
So
what else
let's
is there?
see.
Let me think.
I think that's pretty much the big stuff that we needed to like discuss.
We got stuff for Tiro at all?
Not really. It's pretty much all the other regions are finished. Tiro has got a paragraph at the moment.
Right.
Okay. Do we have any ideas we want to spitball
I
while we're in this atmosphere?
had the idea of essentially what I called the Archive Maximus, or like Archive Magna or something. Essentially, it's a giant library museum kind of thing. And in Onimetru, they had the Archive, which is like the giant. Okay, what was it?
Yeah, it was the archive, I think.
Go ahead.
Was
right.
was it not the archive or
What?
okay?
I wasn't snickering about what you were saying. Continue, please.
Okay. Essentially, it's just a giant like library museum, and where they store. So it's like a combination of like a archive and a university, and so you have like the scholars and the architectures and all those people. They kind of gravitate there. It's like the education or like the scholarly capital of the island. You know, so if you want to be educated, you go there. If you want to, you know,
That's
learn
kind of how
about
I
history
presume
or
it would
anything,
be. That's
right?
what I've
And
thinking
there's
about
also
it from
like
this point.
there's also things of like medicinal. It was like a very it was a focused region around like medicinal and healing, using like, you know, plants and things in order to heal people who are
Definitely.
Rahimatoran. And so you get like farms, and you also get, you know, like doctors or the equivalent of doctors, medics, whatever you want to call them.
Which is fine, like, on the surface level, like, one might look at this stuff like that and be like, oh, there's not as much potential for, like, interesting story here. Maybe not, but we have such great, like, setups for the other regions. I don't mind Tiro being more, like, in the background, if you know what I mean by that.
Right.
Not everyone needs to have massive political intrigue. I think that Tiro could, if we elected to go this route, play a role more in just fundamentally shaping the world around the island through those traits.
You can make that intrinsic to the culture, right? If you have a culture that's mostly built around academics and like doctors, and, you know, has a hospital in it, possibly.
After
you have
last week's podcast, the word intrinsic caused me to have eye twitches. But yes, you're
It's
correct.
intrinsic to the character, Meso.
No, it's not. Shut up.
intrinsic to the
I don't
nature of
know
the island.
if you know what's intrinsic to characters.
I don't know if you
That totally
intrinsically
works.
know what's intrinsic to. No, I honestly do
Yeah,
think.
I don't think you know any intrinsic things at all.
Solek is intrinsic to angering me.
I think just angering you in general is intrinsic to our podcast, and it's intrinsically.
All right.
why we need
So, yes, the jobs that people can have.
Well, I mean, like, yeah,
Tiro
they
are-
don't really have a military, and therefore they're not necessarily like drawn into the Civil War at first. Because
Yeah,
that's not
I
like a-
can imagine Tiro being the like of all the regions, probably the one to not participate in the Civil War at all.
right.
If like very minimally.
Makes sense.
I imagine him kind of like just kind of hippies, you know, just kind of like
the gorillas.
just living the life, just not really like like focusing on all the other regions and what they're doing, but so much is just like learning and exploring and like developing themselves as better characters and, you know,
Right.
better people.
Possibly what happens is that individuals in Tiro would be hired on by the militaries of other Koros, and that might be what eventually draws them into the war, is not necessarily their military force, but their resources and, you know, the stuff. Like, they're probably growing a lot of herbs that could be used for healing purposes or for, you know, different kinds of like chemical warfare or something, and so that is what people go after them for.
Most definitely.
I think as far like I think originally we had thrown out the idea of a Nua being like a chieftain in one certain region. Is this do we see this region as something that has like one big centralized government, or like more like pockets of areas? Or...
I would say like the dean. There's like the person in charge of the school runs the school portion, and like the hospital. But like the most of the farms are like little pocket colonies. You know, like they have.
That would make sense.
Yeah, they have their own. There's like their own community almost.
Because it also felt called back, like, chieftain was an incorrect term when we discussed this way back when. Like, would Onua really be a chieftain? No, in the traditional sense of what that word means. He would be a chieftain for his small little
Right, his community.
Pocket colony.
Right.
pocket colony. He's a village leader, basically.
What's it called? Hold up. A commune, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. It's smaller scale, but it still gives him an important role.
Right.
And it also ties together the close-knit community. It makes sense he'd be the one having like a family that he's attached to.
Right.
And friends that he knows.
We can make it so like the family is very important in Tiro, to where like, you know, you probably live with, you know, even though you get your own house, your parents will come live with you. You have like most of your extended family are around you. You know, it's like a very
almost the complete opposite of Kanae.
Right, exactly.
Which makes it interesting that
air and earth.
Liwa and Bingzak and Onua would know each other and have relationships with each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I think it would make sense, because I don't
would.
think the people, like Vizuna or Bingzak would be necessarily happy or content with the lack of family
Right.
from the regions.
I think that would
Definitely.
be an interesting thing to show, that like the Kanae culture has might have merits in terms of like, you know, the kids are probably better self-starters than the kids in Tiro. You know, people in Tiro might wait until they're 20, 24 essentially to start doing their own thing, as opposed to like Kanae when they're like 15 and they're doing their Aladdin, you know. But it would be it's a like there's a couple benefits, but it's mostly a negative that you don't have like a, you know, the family unit kind of helping you grow up. Being an orphan and everything isn't, yeah.
Well, all right then. I guess we'll flesh out Tiro. I'll come back to that in the future. But as it stands for our 6 particular regions, Mangai and Ihu, pretty developed. Kanae and Motara, love the ideas.
Oh, we haven't talked about Naho yet.
No, aside from we've talked a lot about the Arbiter system, but we have not talked as much about their actual
there was a pitch we talked about last time.
There was a pitch that, I wanted to address that for like the past like 2 episodes that we haven't actually done yet.
Do it. Bring it on.
Essentially, it was a pitch developed around Ghali's backstory as Kivoda. Trying to find it real quick. I remember the name of it. There we go. Apotheosis. Written by Dark Maestro. Yeah.
Hey.
So Dark Maestro sort of wrote up this backstory for Ghali and how like the region of Naho works. And the one thing that I really liked about it and because it wasn't really a canon thing that Naho was going to be our most religious one out of the 6, I don't think. But it kind of became my headcanon after reading his story about it. I guess with the Arbiter thing it sort of was, but even still. Essentially the idea is that Kivoda was obviously she was born without elemental powers, just like all the other Toa were in their regions. But here the government in Naho it's sort of a kingdom in a sense. There's a high priestess, and she's like the main ruler of the region. Some of this stuff is going to be what's in the story, and also some of it's going to be stuff that we've adapted from the story. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a bit of a mixed thing. If anyone out there in the audience has actually read the story already. And anyway, so there's like a high priestess sort of thing in the region, and the high priestess has like a daughter, a princess. So it's sort of like a traditional kingdom kind of thing. Anyway, Kivoda's born, and the high priestess gives her a title to sort of cover up the fact that she doesn't have any elemental abilities, because in the region they have the strongest connection with their elemental lord. They really worship Kivoda, and really not Kivoda, Akita. And put that elemental god up on a really high pedestal. So in that region, to not have elemental powers or to abstain from using elemental powers is a really big deal, to the point where it's like insulting almost. You're like spitting on Akita's gifts, essentially. So the high priestess gives Kivoda this title. In the story, he says it's in Aramite. Aramite,
I think is the correct way to say it.
Yeah, I know it has an actual definition, but in the context of this, the title is given to Kivoda to sort of excuse her from needing to use elemental powers by saying that she is sort of like almost like a monk, in a sense, where she's abstaining from like the pleasures of life. In this instance, using elemental powers as a alternative way of worshiping Akita, by like reserving her usage of that instead of like abusing it or anything like the rest of the region would be.
Yeah.
So it's like it sort of gives her an alternate realistic way of worshiping Akita. So that makes her more acceptable in the rest of society. But it's a secret that she doesn't actually have elemental powers. No one else knows that. They all think that she is just actively participating and abstaining as an Aramite. But that's not true. She has no elemental powers. So she kind of grew up with this lie almost, and she's hiding her powers or her lack of powers from the rest of the people, including her friends. They all kind of think that she's doing this thing. And her ultimate goal is to join the Arbiters, obviously, because that's like a real big cool thing that she like sees. Her friend in this story, Maku, is an Arbiter. So it's kind of like she's got this kind of connection in that. So she really likes that organization, wants to be a part of it, wants to actively contribute to saving her people and being an active part of helping Naho as a community. But she can't because she doesn't have elemental powers, right? So she goes out every day and trains physically and in hand-to-hand combat and everything. She's really skilled at that, to the point that other arbiters are noticing that she is technically more advanced in her physical training than most of them are, because they rely so much on their elemental abilities that they're not physically up to par with her. So that's sort of how she's eyed by Helrix, who's the leader of the arbiters. So anyway, essentially the story is about how there's this beast, this Rahi-ish thing that is terrorizing Naho, and it's going around, it's destroying ships. It was on the outskirts of the region at first, but it's slowly starting to move inward, closer and closer to the rest of society, and it's becoming an even bigger threat. So trade ships are being eaten up and disappearing, and people are vanishing left and right, and it's this big problem. So the arbiters have sent out a ship to try and stop it. At the start of the story, the ship comes back, and it has been completely destroyed, and all the arbiters that were on it aren't on it anymore. I think the story said there was 13 arbiters that went out on the expedition, and only 3 came back. And they were mask embedded in the wood of the ship from the destruction and everything. So it's described as a pretty gruesome thing. Helrix is okay, we need to deal with this. So I am going to go myself, and I need a team of my best arbiters to come with me. But the problem is they don't really have a lot left. Most of them died in that last expedition, so they need to recruit more. They have newbies out there, and Viscera, one of the arbiters, suggests to use them, but Helrix is no, we can't waste our young sisters. We can't do that. We need to find someone who is fully capable of fighting alongside with us, who's trained well enough to fight alongside us. We can't use noobs. So they look towards Kavoda, because she has proven that she's got a lot of prowess as a combat person compared to them. So they sort of recruit her to come along with them. Viscera, who is super, super religious in this thing, she hates Kavoda, because it's how could you possibly abstain from Akita's gifts, you jerk? I hate you. And she's vile and everything. Whereas Maku is really, really accepting of it and everything. Kind of interesting, character dynamics there.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they go on this expedition, this journey out into sea, to see if they can track down whatever this Rahi is and where it's going, or what it's doing and what it is. And as they're on it, the Rahi obviously attacks. It's this giant tentacle kraken Cthulhu-like monster that is otherworldly and bizarre. And the Naho Matoran note that it's so otherworldly that it's not a normal Rahi. There's something really weird and off about it. And I think one of the characters in the story mentions how this is something that Akita would never allow in her waters. This is not one of her creations. This is something completely alien to them. So they start fighting it, and as they're fighting it, they realize that it's predicting their moves. And it knows what they're going to do. Ooh. And it's adapting to what they're doing. And they realize, they come to the conclusion, it learned from all the other ships that it had taken down, that they had sent out to fight it. It had learned their tactics and was adapting, and that was completely destroying them and wrecking them. So they're oh gosh, what are we gonna do? And one of the arbiters gets dragged by one of the tentacles, grabbed by one of the tentacles and dragged towards the ocean. She's oh my gosh, help me, someone save me, help. And Kavoda's okay. And then she grabs her arms to try to keep her from falling, being dragged overboard. And she's use your elemental powers, help me, do something. And things are getting really crazy. Action's amping up. She needs to save this person, and it's I have no elemental powers.
Well.
And the whole ship is just a what?
Wrong time for a plot twist.
And then Helrix steps in. She cuts off the tentacle, and it's you better go below deck. Your services are no longer required here. And Kavoda's okay. And she like walks under deck, and the rest of the arbiters are just still getting like thrown around, destroyed, smacked down, murdered, and it's chaos. And Kavoda, she's like studying the Rahi, and she's trying to think of a way to defeat it. And she looks at the mast, and she comes up with this plan, and I don't remember the exact details, but essentially she gets the Rahi to kind of climb aboard the ship and like make way towards the center of the deck, and she knocks the mast down from like its pedestal position, and it tumbles down and stabs the Rahi through the head. Boom, dead. Kavoda was able to use her like physical prowess to take it out. Everybody rejoices. Everybody's awesome. And that's essentially where that story ends. It's like she becomes an official member of the Arbiters. And there's this really nice writing here at the very end where, as it's describing her planning how to kill the Rahi, it's like she stops, she thinks, she pauses for a second, and then she takes action. And then at the very end, it cuts to present day Gali, and she's standing there on the edge of a cliff, right? And in the distance, there's like this roaring of some kind of creature out of sight. And then like it ends with her stopping, preparing, thinking, and boom, end of story.
Parallelism.
Yeah.
I know you're second for parallelism.
Quickest way to get me to like something.
I like the I like that a lot for the origin of Gali. This is kind of unrelated to the story in terms of like I just think that like we should kind of get the names of these characters clear. I don't think Helric should be the person in charge of the Arbiters. Simply because her character denouts something as I feel that could be put into something more. A lot of people go back and forth between Nokama being like who Nokama is, and Nokama being the leader of the Arbiters, and Helric being something else. Also, like Holly and Maku in their places. So that's really the only thing I kind of disagree with.
What else could Helric do? We want to put the order of modern.
I think she should be in charge of like a much more secret organization. That's kind of maybe kind of this Black Ops division in the Naho tribe, and also kind of like keeping secrets for all these other tribes.
I agree, but I also don't want to have too many organizations.
It's not an organization. It's not an organization. It's like cross off from bingo, guys. It's like Varys from Game of Thrones, where she is she is a secret keeper, and she does have like a network of people doing certain things, but she is in charge of something a lot more darker and sinister, and something that would a person that is going to be a never player once the Civil War comes around, because she has different things going around of different people.
I feel like the leader of the Arbiters could still have those networks.
No, the leader is a public person, though. Helrix is secret. Like the character of Helrix.
She couldn't have a public and secret personality.
I feel like what's the core about
Possibly.
the character of Helrix is that she leads an organization, not necessarily that she leads a secret organization.
Yeah.
Would you?
So
I
we
would.
were
For me, it's like the
loosely
secret
translating
organization,
the
like
character
the
of Helrix.
kind of like an Amanda Waller, as opposed to like
That's fair, but like I can totally see the leader of the Arbiters juggling that. I wouldn't say it would be Nakama. Like if we were going to adapt the core of a character, Nakama's like this wise old elder, not a leader of this group of.
Nakama's the high priestess in this pitch, and I think that fits
priestess. Okay, no, that could work.
Maybe if it was anybody other than Helrix, it'd be Holly, but that's not so much because it fits her character as it is she's the only other person left.
Yeah.
Who it would be.
I mean,
adapting off of.
I mean, Holly was the overachiever in G1. To be fair, we could too. I feel like there is something for an added benefit of having someone involved in Naho that has connections to Naho and also connections to the outside world, because Naho is not going to be involved in the outside world until they're going to be drawn into it.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think you need to come up with a whole other organization or a whole other character or a whole other person to have these connections. I think Helrix can still have them.
Well, I mean, and
still be the leader of the Arbiters.
If the leader of the Arbiters is going out and doing things with other people in the Koro, the actual Koro is no longer isolated in the island. The actual island's no longer isolated. It's no longer is thing where they are separate from the rest of the island, but they do have one person doing things in secret behind everyone's back. This is now, it's essentially the president or the chief of police going out and doing all these things of other people. And so that kind of takes away from what we were wanting, the concept of Naho as a island that's separate from the rest. They don't really communicate with a lot of the others.
I don't really see that. I don't get that that point. IMO. I don't see how the chief of police being the one to negotiate with like outside connections would suddenly make the entire rest of the island and the rest of the region lose that sort of state of seclusion. It's only one character. And I don't believe she would be sharing her connections with the rest of the arbiters. It'd be something she'd keep to herself, surely. So I don't know how that would really affect the island. I mean the region. I keep saying island, but I mean region.
Right, the region.
The chat did bring up Tuyet as another also alternative character that could be that person that you're looking for.
Tuyet could be. Well, I mean, like
I still don't really think you need to separate these characters and make these two different people, though.
Okay, how about this? Well, I kind of get where you're coming from in terms of like it's a thing that like as we are assembling the plot, we might find a need for this kind of character later on. I don't want to get rid of this entirely, but I also get why you're not necessarily wanting to introduce this right now. So what if we just said Helrix is not confirmed to be in this, but Tuyet is in charge. We don't have a Helrix character, so we're not splitting character. We're not adding an additional character. We're just having the same thing and reserving the Helrix name for something if we decide to do it later down the line.
I'm not really sure why the Helrix name is so important.
I think it does connotate something. When I think of like, I mean, I'm not saying this is what everyone thinks when they think of the character, but when I think of the character, I do think of someone kind of like this Nick, again, look very Amanda Waller, Varys, someone with a lot of connections who's working behind the scenes, in a separate way than anything else is going to. And I think like having that element of a third player might tie into or make another plot that goes on. Having a Black Ops division of the Arbiters, having that kind of thing might actually pay off in a future storyline, or it might be something that we want to use in the later storyline. To me, like it's a kind of a waste to have Helrix when you can have another person kind of doing that. It's kind of a waste to just use that name right now.
That's fair, I suppose. In that insight,
not really.
I just don't really think we're gonna have that kind of.
It's fair if you're like separating those characters, but I still don't see why you have to do that. I don't know if you really made a convincing argument as to why that would take away from the character or ruin the region.
I mean, you want to, okay? I can try to devote one right now. So what I kind of,
might as well hash it out while it's a topic.
Yeah, I suppose. One thing I did want to clarify to the audience, because I know like some people are mentioning it in the, or not really mentioning it, but like it just reminded me of it in the live studio audience, is that another addition to, I don't know if we talked about this before actually, but another addition to the Naho region is that they're extremely split apart from the rest of the island, to the point of they're like one like bad experience with the rest of the island away from just splitting off entirely and becoming their like completely closing their borders up. Because the thing with Naho is that they've got a very diverse region with plenty of food, plenty of commerce, plenty of economy to work with. They could essentially establish their own like area without needing to trade with the rest of the island.
right.
So they're sort of on the verge of completely breaking off. So just feel like adding that clarification in case people are wondering why we're arguing about keeping these characters in secret or potentially ruining their relationship with the rest of the islands, because that relationship is very strong. Their opinions on the rest of the island.
Right.
Fair enough.
So.
Let's continue with this Helrix versus Tuyet thing. Like, basically what I'm getting here is John foresees that there will be a need in the future, or perhaps the possibility of a need, for an Order of Motunui-esque group that works in the shadows.
Yeah, but that's not what Varys is, so I don't know if that's really what you're.
Well, I mean, like
at.
Varys was one of the. I was going to draw inspiration from both of them. Essentially, a middle ground in between Varys and in between like Amanda Waller, assembling teams essentially or assembling mercenaries, hiring things to destabilize this thing. She's working partially in the interest of Naho and partially in the interest of kind of keeping things going her own way in the island. So it'll be another player that can add something as a connected individual to all the other Koros while the Civil War is going on.
Now, what purpose will she serve that Umarak could not in the same role? Manipulating for self-interests.
Yeah.
It would be a counter to Umarak.
Okay.
How we have you have Littlefinger and you have Varys, and you have Umarak and you have Helrix.
Why do you need a counterpart, and what does that serve the story?
So, okay, the story essentially is about an island which is semi-united and semi-divided as well. And the divide is growing more than united. That is what's going to destabilize the region in year 2. And so, as we are introduced to all these different players and how they're connecting together, someone who is acting as a negotiator in order to get things, get people on one side for their own purpose, is going to essentially end up bringing the Civil War to fruition. It's essentially going to be split, down the middle. There's going to be two sides. And so there's got to be characters kind of ramping up to either of both sides. Again, in Game of Thrones, various sides of Daenerys, right, and Littlefinger sides of Jon.
I previously wasn't under the assumption or the state where I felt like we were diving too far into something, but I feel like we're starting to get there now. I don't know if this is a plot that is necessary for the story we're trying to tell, and I feel like it's almost going a bit too deep into these secret organizations.
This is
side plots that I don't think are necessary to the story, and I don't really think add to anything other than side content. I don't know if because the Civil War needs to be a plotline that's supposed to be approachable because it's going to be our main story of year 2. So the motivations that are going to be causing it to happen need to be very clear in the actual narrative here, not just our side stories, not just our serials or our B plots.
Right.
It needs to be something very up and center. And I'm not sure if we need, especially if we already have one secret organization with the Shadow One. I don't know if we need 2 to counteract that other secret organization.
It's not the Dark Hunters aren't a secret organization. But, okay, here's where I'm getting at necessarily. Right now, what I'm foreseeing is a possible need in the future for a character like this. And for me right now, I understand where you're coming from. We might be getting too convoluted. You're right. And it's probably something that we'll have to figure out once we actually start figuring out the story. My main thing right now is saying, do we want to maybe use this name too soon, or we could use something else and save this character for another thing? I get what you're saying with you don't want to split.
The thing, but the thing is the reason that you're so you want to save this name is so that you can reserve it for a thing that I don't really think we need or I think would add to our story to begin with. So when you're asking me to wait and reserve the name for a plotline that I'm not sure I'm ever going to be convinced is something that we should have, I'm not sure if I'm in favor of that, because to me it seems like we're wasting that name for something that I don't even think is going to help the story or contribute to it.
Tuyet, for instance, I think I could make a similar argument about Tuyet. I would say that Tuyet is a villain character, unless we plan to have the leader of the Arbiters become a B-tier antagonist in the future. I could say that perhaps we would be more served reserving Tuyet for a possible future.
I could see the leader of the Arbiters facing off against Scully. That would be that conflict does.
Yeah, that is going to happen
right.
once she becomes
Scully. That is going to happen. So that is a thing in favor of Tuyet. To be fair.
Yeah, the region's going to reject Gali as a part of their thing.
Right.
So that's why that works, but.
Yeah, I don't know. The only time where I could really see an organization that could run counter and in a sense could fight the Dark Hunters and be have political intrigue and that'd be cool to see would be during the Civil War. But in that period of time, we're already going to be having everybody fighting each other, and we're already going to be having Makuta manipulating people in the background. I don't know if we did have this conflict, it would be in supplemental material, and I'm not opposed to that. It could be totally cool. Like, I know a lot of people really liked that element about G1. If we were going to draw a parallel to that, a lot of people really liked the whole Order of Mata Nui versus Brotherhood of Makuta story serial shenanigans.
Yeah, but I can also say
lot of
that
people
that
did not.
contributed
It did contribute to
that
the
contributed
people-
to people dropping
Yeah.
off.
A lot of people did not like it. It was way too convoluted, way too complex, too many organizations. I always felt kind of in the middle because the stuff's cool in concept.
But
It's
execution.
just weaving it into the plot and having it be relevant and interesting to watch is tricky.
And I mean, like, it's fair because you're expecting, you want to be convinced by essentially a pitch for what Hellworks is going to do, and I don't have that for you. And so right now you're like, why are we doing it if we don't really have a pitch for it? I'm thinking of a point in time in the future where we're doing this brainstorming session with all the stuff we already know, and we will have a place for a character like this, and we'll be like, oh well, I mean, like, I guess we could have used Hellworks, but it's too, we already have all this stuff around about it already, so that will be too late to use that here. But
What?
I'm not gonna die on a stake for it, but I'm also like, right now, that's my thing right now.
It's part of a larger concern that I'm feeling now after hearing the pitches being presented to me, is that I do feel like perhaps you're starting to move a bit too far away from the Toa's plot and into the side plot stuff now. Because I don't know, it's like I'm with you for like your pitch with Motara. Like I think most of those ideas are good in concept, and I think that's fine. But when I mentioned how I felt like it was a bit too wordy, I'm not sure I knew what I meant when I said that, and now I think I'm starting to get some clarity. I feel like these pitches are starting to go too in depth, too much, to the point where I don't see it actually in like coming together in our current story. It feels too contained, too self-contained, too separate from the actual narrative that's happening, to the point where I'm not sure there's actually any point in developing this stuff, because it seems counterintuitive, especially if we're going to like reserve names for them that we could use right now for stories like the current one that this guy presented that actually is part of Golly's backstory. That's why that Hellworks character is important, because that story is revolving around the Toa.
Right, and I think, I mean, again, the story isn't changed by changing the name, but I think the name has a connotation of it that we could use for a better advantage. That's all essentially what I'm saying right now.
Well,
We use the names as, I mean, again, it's because we want to give ourselves a bit of limitation, sure, but we do use the names, and we kind of draw a couple elements of what they're connotated with in G1 and G2, And so right now I'm looking at what we're doing with this person named Hellworks, and I don't think that's the best usage of this name right now, when it could be used potentially for something better down the line.
The thing that I think should be kept in mind regarding supplemental material and side stories is that we've mentioned it numerous times, like we need to do this eventually, but we still have not fleshed out our supporting cast. And Eljay made the comment earlier, like, the side characters. And yes, that's true. We've had like 7 different leg debates about the concept of Matoran, but we still have not had a big conversation about what these Matoran are actually going to be doing in our story. The way I've always imagined it, which my imaginations of things can be wildly off base. We saw that last week with my mask makers comment, or like masks and stuff, but I always envisioned the Menog counterpart would be where a lot of this stuff comes out. It's where we would actually see a lot of the inner workings of this stuff, because we can literally, like, Menog just had people, we could talk to people, a la Mass Effect, for instance, and just get big exposition dumps framed in conversations. We can have an in-game codex, where we can, like, read the lore of the island, or whatever.
Sure.
We can travel across the island as a Matoran, and we can have to, like, pay the tolls in Motara, or whatever, and interact with these... What'd you call them? Like the wall, the royalty, the king.
The merchant kings, right?
Already.
Well, I mean, okay.
The merchant kings. A lot of this stuff would come to light in that atmosphere. I don't really see it having much of a role in the TV show at all. But that's the beauty of multi-layered storytelling.
It goes back
That's
to what you
I
said
hope
to
they do for G2.
the guy you responded in the earlier thing. You're right. Like all this stuff that we're talking about right now and the things with Motara, those are all just so that we have a backdrop to where we show the world. A lot of times we were going to show stuff in a TV show and people are just going to accept it. You pay the toll going into Motara. You don't need to explain the whole history of the Merchant Kings and how that all works. You don't.
But for
you just
those
show
people that care about it, there is an avenue to find out.
Right, and also if we have decisions that tie into that it's consistent enough that it makes sense. The viewer's not left wondering, oh, how come this happened when,
That
Right.
being said, it is important to not walk down the G1 path where the supplemental material overtook the main story, both in complexity and quantity.
Right, exactly.
The amount of stories that were told outside of the main plotline got a little too much, and it started going from if people care to find out why there's a reason to if you want to know the full story you have to read a billion other story serials
and a billion other books.
It's a tightrope we can walk. We could have these secret organizations, but their stories would have to be contained, and they have to be relevant enough to matter, but not too relevant to where you need to read everything to get the full
You have to
picture.
like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. it almost.
Yes,
Right.
and to be honest, I'm not sure. We have not yet written down anything. I'm not sure if we're that good of writers to walk that tightrope
Between the
yet. Maybe we are. I don't know. We'll have to see in time. So, I don't know. As far as like Helrix versus Tuyet or something, I feel like both characters, like you want Helrix to be a shady character.
Right.
In a sense. Working for good, but sometimes for the wrong for doing the wrong stuff, like Amanda Waller.
Sure, yeah, something like that.
Either
right.
way, the cake is cut. Tuyet or Helrix could fit that bill.
Okay, I see what you're saying there.
So, like, I'm not sure if I'm for or against a secret organization per se, but I'm also not sure if it has.
No, I mean,
to be
I get that
Helrix who
note
leads the argument.
where it's like we if we're going to
My
be
only
planning for
concern
things,
is taking
right.
Yeah, my only concern is taking things away from the main plot.
In order to
accommodate
service
the
the
plot.
side story.
Yeah.
I get that. I just my only thing with that is that I don't right now where we are. You could name this character Tuyet or Helrix, and that doesn't change anything. So we just have to decide which name is more valuable for this character right now. Do you think that the character benefits from being named Helrix as opposed to Tuyet? Do you think that it benefits from being Tuyet instead of Helrix? Like,
You
what
really
do you
gotta
think of this
think
switch?
about the connotations that go along with those names.
Yes.
Because we're obviously trying to attribute names that are at least somewhat recognizable and carry a certain atmosphere about them. So if you're going to name a character Tuyet, there's a very strong chance she's not going to be a good character. If you're going to name it Helrix,
we kind
she's gonna
of
be a
touched
character
upon
of
this
importance.
like half an hour ago when you were gone.
Tuyet has
yeah.
to be a villain, which is exactly what you're saying. At some point, Tuyet
Yeah.
has to turn bad.
Right.
In which case, it's really cut and dry at that point.
It is.
Well, but that's the thing, though, is kind of like he was getting at, like, we don't know which name services this character more because we don't know if they're going to end up being a bad character or a good character.
At some point, the Arbiter leader is going to come in conflict
She's
with
going to
Gali.
be in conflict with
Does
Gali.
that conflict mean it's just like a conflict, or does that mean the Arbiter will become a villain? I don't personally think so.
Well, I would say that
I
like,
think I think the distinction is the character would become an antagonist, yes, but that doesn't mean they would be a villain.
right.
Yes. I would reserve not Helrix, I would reserve Tuyet for future material
future
if
material.
the decision was left to me. But I understand the logic behind secret organization and stuff. That is a Bionicle staple.
Sure. Well,
See, my like especially when you're using characters like Amanda Waller and Varys to sort of sell this pitch. To me, that the concept of secret organization fits Helrix more, but the characters that you're using to pitch it to me fits Tuyet more to me. Those
That's
characters
fair.
and their moral standing fit Tuyet more so than they do
Well,
Helrix.
Tuyet is the thing with Tuyet. First is that Tuyet is going to come in conflict with Gali, but also we have to think about this character too. Eventually, she's going to try and pull Naho into the Civil War, right? Because we need to have that narratively. We do need to have that conflict that happens with Gali be part of the year storyline, which is going to be the Civil War. So at some levels that has to connect, and I think with the aspect of the secret organization could be to pull Naho into the war and manipulate on that side, so that Naho has a reason to not split off and cut off entirely. They need
Well, see, I mean, because another part of it is like I feel that maybe this was just a headcanon thing, but I kind of feel like the leader of the Arbiters would be sort of the pocket leader of the region more so than the High Priestess is. In the sense that she, like, because she holds so much authority over the region, she ends up sort of having more power than the actual ruler does, in the same kind of sense that, like, the Queen of England doesn't really hold much power over Britain.
Right, but
despite being the Queen.
Parliament does. Well, I mean, like, if you're thinking of, like, a person that kind of usurps the role of a certain role that was given to her and kind of changes that in order to suit her own ends, that is Tuyet.
Well, do you want to get community feedback and return to this?
Maybe.
Next
Well, here's the issue, though. Community feedback is not going to help us in this aspect because the community is going to write a different story than we are going to write if we have given this much vagueness. We just kind of have to decide, kind of here on out, what we want this character, this leader character, to be. Is she going to be the person that draws Naho in, or is some other influence outside her going to corrupt and lead her to join the war? Because that's what in my idea, my pitch, it would be Tuyet, who's like, the religious kind of, person who's kind of taken over the government away from the High Priestess, even though, like a military religious organization thing taken away from the actual thing. Yeah, that fits. And then Helrix would eventually corrupt her or kind of convince her to join the war against the wishes of the High Priestess. And that would cause this conflict, essentially bringing Naho against the culture standards into the war, which is something they normally wouldn't do. But
it'll all depend on the context of why this is happening, though, because if it's a sense where the High Priestess is the one that wants the island to be separated and everything, and Helrix wants to fight in the war, but maybe she wants to fight in the war because she believes it's the right thing to do.
Exactly, right? So
restore balance on the islands on the island.
So what kind of character is this person going to be? That's going to depend on that name that we choose for it. Is it going to be a heroic name that has heroic connotations, or a villainous name that has villainous connotations? There would... Okay.
Yeah.
This could tie into back to the concept. This is another thing that was pitched last night. I don't know if you were there when we talked about it, Var. There was a pitch that...
It wasn't. Oh, boy.
Yeah, remember this?
Oh, boy.
Way back
Buckle
when...
in.
Way back when the Water Matoran all used the mask of water breathing, essentially, and they had their whole civilization on the ground. And so when Gali took the masks from them, they were forced to relocate, and that's why they have this new civilization that's built around boats and electricity and doing this thing on the sea above.
What he means is that there used to be a Mari Nui-esque underwater city. Once the Toa took the masks away, they lost access to that city. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So that gives even more reason for them to hate Gali.
Right, exactly. Right, because the last Gali did that to them. Against all their
Naho, out of everybody, was one of the ones who was most affected by the
mask changing.
By the mask
actions
power.
of
Right.
Toa.
And they didn't use the mask as much as the others did, so they weren't corrupting everyone as much. But the other people on the island were, and that led to the decision to take away all the masks. And so that was kind of the start of Naho separating themselves off of the rest of the island, because the rest of the island cost them their city. And cost them their way of life.
And I think John and I had slightly different interpretations of this, but I was like, it would be cool if we could replicate or pay homage to Mari Nui, because what if some people had been able to just book it and just run and just stay down in that underwater city and live there all these years, and now that it's rediscovered, it's like Mari Nui all over again, and people are down there using air bubbles to live and stuff, because I didn't want to mirror Voriki's city, which we're going to rediscover, which is another ancient city, except everybody's dead. So it was if we have this underwater city, what if some people are still alive?
It does give us the access to a new location for future stuff. If we ever decide to go past the third year, there's still a new location that's still tied to the island that we haven't explored yet. And it doesn't need to be a whole year
how
there.
That plays into Helrix versus Tuyet, I don't know.
No, I was just saying that that we were talking about the conflict that would draw them into the Civil War, essentially. And it could, right now we're talking about the mask and everything and how that's going to ignite that. That could also be.
They got bad blood.
The priestess wants one thing. The priestess feels that Aikida gave Gali this power, and we should honor that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quite.
Okay. Well, these are definitely all thoughts worth thinking about,
right.
for sure.
In the interest of not having another gargantuan podcast, I would like to move into wrapping this up, unless there are some closing thoughts.
I think it's alright. I'm fine either way. I just think that we should be, this is a thing we should talk about is what are our characters going to do before we name them. Who do we want this character to ultimately be a well-intentioned but bad, kind of antagonist character, or do we want them to be a antagonist that will actively cause conflict with
antagonize,
right?
Yes.
Nokama and everything, Nokama and Gali.
I mean, I see it as the former, but
Likewise, I do as well. But that's what it is.
It's a kind of a similar relationship almost, but not exactly to Jaller and Narmoto in a sense.
Okay.
How like Jaller, I don't know if Jaller's not necessarily like a villain either, but he's also kind of Narmoto's antagonist in a sense.
It's just Sentinel Prime.
Yeah, but even, like not even Sentinel Prime.
It's true because
Sentinel Prime was
you're right. Jaller
is
is usually a main character, like a main good character. It's not like
Yeah.
It's not like who's
and he's still going to be a good character, but he will have his own
agenda,
story
right, his
that
own
gets in the way of
Tahu's,
Tahu's.
right, an antagonist.
Yeah.
And so Tuya could be like
All right.
devoted to restoring that honor, restoring the city, and restoring
Devoted to, yeah.
and the combat against the Toa, because they didn't do it the last time. They didn't fight the Toa the last time, and she's like, we're not going to have this happen again.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Before we close,
One final little
Any
headcanon thought that I had real
go
quick.
for it. Sorry.
It was the High Priestess being Nakama, right?
Sure.
yes.
In the pitch, the apotheosis, Holly is the princess, daughter of Nakama, the High Priestess. So she's obviously in line for whatever. One headcanon thing that we don't necessarily have to do, but I kind of got it from the story as I was reading, even though he never explicitly said it, was that Kivoda was Holly's sister and also the younger daughter of the High Priestess, and that's why she gave her the title and the name to hide her
Because it would be socially unacceptable.
Who is
Exactly.
royalty right now, though? We have.
Too many people.
I think we're coming
A
across
lot of people, yeah.
I mean, like it's too similar to Kopaku's thing, so I don't mind it. But as of right now, I think we can still have her story about it. I don't think we can have Kopaku's story about him being royalty.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dismiss the idea, but it is a thing where we're getting too many people that happen to be prince or princesses become Toa.
Fair enough.
All right. This podcast was largely brainstorming. It was largely pitch-driven. I am curious to hear your thoughts on this because, again, we are in the process of doing our story Bible right now. That's what we're currently focusing on. With any luck, we're going to have stuff to show from that pretty soon. And then we're all going to be able to discuss this more thoroughly and hash it out. Right now, we're still in conceptualizing stage for a lot of it. So it was important to at least verbalize this and address some of like the basic flaws, questions, and thoughts for all these ideas. There are still a few things on the message boards that I wanted to talk about in more detail that we were not able to get to this week, but we will next time. I'll just like briefly call attention to them real quick. The Toa Nui minifigure design pitch was really cool, done by Fuego de Serra, not sure which. We're going to be talking about that in the future, I feel, as a potential way to...
Yeah.
evolve
I
the
saw that
story.
and immediately thought it could work.
Just
in,
know
like,
that
very
we do-
far future storylines.
We do see it, and we will come back to this in the future. Maybe next week, maybe not, but we do see it.
Probably
And
not
additionally-
anytime soon because it doesn't fit with our the current plot lines.
Right.
But-
True.
I like how it looked, and I like the concept of it, like the fusion Steven universe and how they like the fandom always tries to come up with their own fusions
exactly.
and stuff. I like.
if
that
we were ever
aspect.
to do something like this, it wouldn't be a thing that would happen soon.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to shout out Hazash's Matoran Masks pitch. This thing's way too detailed to get into right now, but basically he took the challenge from last week and said we'd come up with 12 like unique mask powers that aren't too OP, and he's taken a crack at it. I'm not sure if all of them work flawlessly, but most of them are non-obtrusive augmentations, be it in terms of physical abilities or mental abilities, rather than any OP dimension time breaking shenanigans. We will be talking about that more in the future as well, perhaps as soon as next week. I don't know. But I just wanted to mention, yes, we saw that. I think it's cool. We'll talk about it more in the future. So that being said, if any of you listen to this, please leave your thoughts on everything we talked about today as we develop this story Bible. Every week I like to shout out somebody from our Patreon who continues to help keep making this possible. This week the shout out's going to go to TTR Cuddles, is their name on Patreon. And they're a great supporter of ours, been in the stream chat a lot. Thank you very much for your continued support, as well as all of you who decided to join us today on our Discord, and all of you who decided to watch us on YouTube. It means a lot to us. And, yeah, we will see you all next week, and I hope you all have a good one. I'm Meso.
I'm Var.
I'm Eljay.
I'm Jonathan.
And farewell, everybody. We will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Dude, I am so tired right now. I don't know if you can hear it in the way we're talking, but man, I am tired.